Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. Today is extremely warm where I live, so we have foregone the camera and we're going to be a little PNG just for this video. But today we are taking a look at Royal Rebels, and that is because Royal Rebels didn't get any direct support but did get a brand new tool in Chiron the Star Knight. So this card is not awful, but it's also not much to look at. So this is a 2300, 1800, level 7 Fiend. So that's not great, right? Defense of 18 is like fine. 2300 attack though, quite poor. But its effect is that if your opponent has a monster on their field, send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, choose a level 5 or higher face-up Fiend monster, which could be itself or any of your other monsters. This turn, that monster inflicts piercing damage. So this is actually quite good in the Death Doom Requiem strategy. The reason being, this deck really struggles to deal with face-down monsters. So what we have seen in the past is people using things like Pierce and things like Stop Defense to allow these cards to either pop your opponent's monsters using something like Royal Rebels Doom Metal, or to get an attack boost off of Heavy Metal, and then use the Pierce spell, or again flip something up, attack over it, and that's how we get to their life points. But now we have a new tool in Chiron, which will allow us to do that a little bit easier. And because this is a level 7 monster, this does slot into the deck very, very nicely, because Invasion doesn't really do much for this deck other than just be a level 7 body. So now we can just immediately replace that with Chiron, and we have a level 7 that actually does something. So one of the plays that we will quite often do with this deck is we'll use the skill to get out Chiron and then ideally something else, maybe a Doom Metal or a Heavy Metal, then tribute the boss monster that we summoned as well as a non-boss monster to get out a Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal can then use its effect to pop a guy, then we can use our defense mode Chiron to basically give our Heavy Metal piercing, which can be a really substantial amount of damage we get through. Another brand new tool we have is Curse of the Rising Light, which is if your opponent has one or less card in their hand, change the battle position of one monster on your opponent's field to face-up attack position or face-down defense position. This turn, if your opponent activated a trap card or is the first turn of the player going second, both players also draw 2 cards. This is another tool we can use to change our opponent's monsters to face-up attack position to get more damage in. So also really, really good. But again, people are starting to play around this card a little bit more, especially in like a tournament setting. On the ladder, not so much, but in tournaments, people have started to get a little bit savvy over this card. But the skill is still reasonably powerful in this deck. So the only restriction is that we have to play Fiends, except for level 4s, which can be whatever they want. So that's not a really bad restriction, all things considered. And then the rest of the skill just lets us cheat out 2 high-level monsters. So again, if we consider getting these monsters out as sort of plussing us by the number of tribute fodder, then theoretically this is like sort of a +4, which is actually a really, really good skill. The only downside is this skill gives us like nothing in terms of consistency. Because we're going to be playing a large number of boss monsters anyway, and because we basically need this to make any of our guys do anything, we're not actually getting any searching from the deck. We're not having easy access to piercing, we're not having easy access to our boss monsters, we're not having any kind of searching or creating cards. So this can be a little bit lackluster, but the actual value from the skill, assuming you draw a good hand, is still really, really good. The only big negative with this skill is it has this turn, you cannot attack directly using a monster with 2600 or more attack, which means if we do use our Heavy Metal, boost its attack, we then have to ram that into one of our opponent's monsters. So it's a face-up monster, that's fine. If it's a face-down monster, we're going to need to give it piercing with Chiron. But other than that, this deck is still in a good-ish spot. So because we don't have all the consistency that we like, we don't have a lot of draw power in this deck, for example, we are playing Curse of the Rising Light, which again, if we're going second, gets us a double draw. We're also playing Ghost Cyclone, which again, if we're going second, we can pop our opponent's back row and then get a free draw. And we're also playing Rising Light Angel Essel, because if we go second, we can get extra value, get more cards in the graveyard. Getting cards in the graveyard is still really, really good, because we can use Royal Rebels Phaser to bring them back. So if we get a Chiron into the graveyard, for example, we can go Phaser, bring it out, give something piercing, then maybe even tribute it off. There's a lot of things we can do with this. And just getting an extra body on the field can be really good, again, especially if it's one of our bosses. So what that basically means is this build of the deck is go second turbo, because if we go second, we can get so much value between Curse of the Rising Light, between Ghost Cyclone, and between Essel. So this is a little bit of a high roll deck. Now, you can build this deck in a completely different way, right? You could take out the Essels, you could take out the Curse, you could take out the Ghost Cyclone, replace some like trap cards, maybe replace some more control tools, and play this as a sort of control deck. But because of the way the meta is right now, where everyone's just OTKing each other left and right, I decided that this would be the better way to build this. Now, this isn't necessarily, like I say, the best way, but in the current meta, I think the only real way for this deck to thrive is to kind of cheese wins out of your opponent, to high roll them, and to just kind of absolutely apply a ridiculous amount of pressure, and ideally try and even OTK them. Because, I mean, if every other deck is OTKing, why wouldn't we be trying to OTK? So going through like some of the more important cards of the deck, we have Doom Metal. If Doom Metal's effect resolves, it is absolutely fantastic. Not forgetting that we do now have Curse of the Rising Light, so we can flip a monster face up, which is an extra target to hit with Doom Metal. If Doom Metal does resolve, typically we're in a really fantastic spot. The only issue is we don't always have the tools we need to make this resolve, right? We're going to need one of each of our bosses because our skill summons one level 7, one level 8. We need a buyer with our opponent having 3 face-up monsters, which again can be a little bit tricky. We need a phaser with the graveyard already set up. So there are lots of ways to get to this, but it doesn't really come together that often, unfortunately, especially when we have no real time for setup. Heavy Metal is going to be the heavy hitter of the deck. Typically, we're going to want to pop one of our opponent's monsters, then we're going to want to pierce over them. Really, really good. Chiron is pretty decent, and it's obviously our new tool. Sometimes we try to play like the slow control game, where we're just using Chiron to pierce over our opponent's defense position monsters, and that can work to an extent, but with how fast the meta is right now, we did find that this sort of strategy was a little bit too slow and was getting a little bit punished. Next up, we're on All-Seeing Harvey, and this card is okay. So we could use this to look at our opponent's back row, but that doesn't usually matter too much. But primarily, we can combine this with Curse of the Rising Light to flip an opponent's monster to face down defense position and then pop it out of the way, as well as the fact that it actually has decent stats. Now, we've seen a lot of people experiment with this slot. At the start, we were playing Kobold in this slot, just because digging through our deck on turn 2 to find Curse of the Rising Light is really, really powerful, or something like an Essel. But we've also seen people experimenting with Elemental Hero Clayman, just to be a big defensive monster. We've had people talk about playing Elemental Hero Sparkman, because again, it's just a vanilla with decent stats, which can make a difference. Harvey is what we did settle on. It didn't do a ton for us in testing, but I think the theory behind this card is still really, really strong. Again, Essel is just massive high roll potential. That just kind of goes with the theme. Fire is really, really strong. The only downside we found with this is a lot of the time our opponents are setting monsters against us because we're playing Rebels, right? So because this guy only gains levels based on face-up monsters, it was really difficult to get up to 7 to get a good Doom Metal playoff. Phaser, again, absolutely fantastic. Just brings back our material, and it's really good to get a Chiron out and then use Chiron's effect and then maybe even tribute off afterwards. And then we have Arching Soldiers because the stats are really nice. For our legend spell, Pot of Greed, just again, we want to high roll, we want to draw into this, we want to draw. Our ideal, like, turn 2 is that we're going to activate, like, Pot of Greed, we're going to activate Curse of the Rising Light, we're going to activate Ghost Cyclone, we're going to summon out an Essel, we're just going to get this ridiculous amount of advantage, and we're going to try and kill our opponent all at once. Sometimes that'll work, sometimes that won't. And then for our legend trap, we are playing Widespread Ruin. But this is pretty much amazing into anything that isn't like Light Galaxy and Hero. Hero can pop this out of the way, Light Galaxy can pop this out of the way, and Light Galaxy obviously also have that protection built into their Eternal. So not great into there, but this card is amazing into Red Boot because Trap Hole's not going to be super useful into that deck because they can dodge it using their Striping Wyvern. So overall, my thoughts on this deck are it is a fun deck to play, right? When everything falls into place, when you draw a really good hand, this deck actually feels really, really nice. The issue is, how often is that going to happen? On top of the fact, if your opponent just has a trap card to kind of stop your big play, you kind of get absolutely shut down and you don't really get to do anything. So it kind of feels a little bit like Red Boot in that way, where Red Boot is a deck, again, that if your opponent just like has a legend trap, you kind of get stopped in what you're trying to do and you don't really get to play the game. And unfortunately, this deck does kind of suffer from that as well. I think realistically, this deck doesn't have a great matchup into any of the current meta, but again, if you do high roll, you 100% can take games off any of those decks. We took games off of Light Galaxy, we took games off of Dark Galaxy, off of Spellcasters, off of Heroes. We did manage to beat pretty much the entire field whilst testing this deck. It's just, the win rates weren't fantastic. We still did win a lot more than we lost, but it's really not convincing wins. These were very much stealing wins from the jaws of defeat. So overall, it's a fun deck. If you're looking for something a bit interesting to shake things up, this could be something to look at. Overall, I don't think it's worth going into this box 3 times to get 3 copies of Chiron if that's the only thing you're going for. So I couldn't recommend this. But again, if you're looking for something a little bit different, this could scratch your itch. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.